Welcome to the Growth Series podcast, where we explore how AI is reshaping industries and accelerating innovation. I'm your host, Josh Jackson. At Red Letter AI, we help businesses scale their revenue, generate consistent and predictable leads, and streamline systems so it makes you feel like you have 100 sales reps, even if you only have 5. So if you're ready to take your business to the next level, you're in the right place. And if you'd like a free growth consultation, drop the word growth in the comments below. Well, today, my guest is Adam Barney, founder of Scale Smarter and creator of the Energy Operating System, a performance infrastructure designed to help founders and executive leaders reclaim clarity, stamina, and executive capacity so they can scale their businesses without burnout. Adam spent over 20 years in corporate America, managing over $100 million in ad spend for Fortune 50 brands like Microsoft, before launching his own leadership system that helped founders make faster, cleaner decisions under pressure. His work blends strategy, neuroscience, and purpose, empowering leaders to move from operating to visionary CEO with more energy, alignment, and impact. Well, welcome to the show.
Hey, Josh, pumped to be here. And man, I have to say, growth always and always might be my new favorite leadership philosophy.
Right? I love it. I appreciate you being on the show today, but I would love to know more about Scale Smarter. So let's talk about that. What is it you do, and who is it that you do serve?
Sure. So you kind of mentioned a little bit of this. Of course, I love working with founders and executives to keep them stay energized, make forward progress, and thrive with optimism. But it comes down to this belief that scaling doesn't always have to mean running yourself into the ground. But Josh, as you mentioned, I spent nearly 2 decades in corporate marketing, managed over $100 million in paid ad spend across big companies, Digitas, Akamai, Microsoft, as well as venture capital-backed startups. And in that, I lived the grind. I went through this myself, big wins, late nights, caffeine trophies, but eventually, just like anyone in this world who grinds that hard, I hit a wall. And, I actually call it a stair moment, right? So one morning, mid-career, I was sprinting to a meeting, and boom, my body just didn't know what to do. It kind of quit on me. I, ended up losing just my way, pulled a muscle walking up the stairs. And that was a way in those early days of saying, congratulations, you've optimized everything except yourself.
Yeah. Well, you've had a fascinating journey from managing 100 million in ad spend to building systems that help leaders manage their own energy. So what's inspired the shift from external marketing performance to internal energy performance?
I've gone through tracking click-through rates, but not cortisol levels, right? I knew every conversion metric, but I had zero awareness of my own depletion curve, let's call it. So I realized that I needed to start treating energy the way I treated those marketing budgets, and needed to audit the inputs and the outputs, understand what's fueling me, what's draining me, and where's the ROI on my efforts. And that became the foundation, going back to your last question, actually, of this Energy OS system, which is, again, as you sort of mentioned, it's a 90-day install for leaders to reclaim 10 to 20 hours of executive capacity each week and shift from operator mode into visionary mode. Because obviously, Josh, you can't out strategize exhaustion. You can only out energize it. And that's when everything clicked for me. My leadership wasn't broken. It was my battery that needed some tinkering with.
Right. So we talked previously before this call, and, you mentioned that every founder eventually hits what's called a founder operator bottleneck. So what does that look like, and why do so many people get stuck there?
It really gets down to where we are now in this hustle era, Josh, right? I think what we see across founders, entrepreneurs, and what I see time and time again working across hundreds of them is how there's that glorified exhaustion that's disguised as ambition. And I love being a part of the cog in the wheel where we're seeing this rise of energy intelligence, because it really opens up the ability to look at what fuels you, what drains you, and then how to manage that portfolio of those two different sides of the coin intentionally. And, I tell my coaching clients, you already track your financial capital, your human capital. You need to start tracking your energy capital. And actually, I think that should be ultimately more important than the first two, because it ends up laddering into how successful you can be in the other areas. I see mismanaged energy time and time again as actually the silent killer of growth. Working with founders and entrepreneurs, there's data out there in the world where you go from bootstrap to seed scale to Series A into Series B. And when you start to move from Series B and beyond, founders lose focus. They lose that critical amount of energy that keeps them moving forward and staying in the middle. One client that I've worked with, a fintech founder, told me, I don't have time to think anymore, right? That's the core of the problem here. And that's where you start to install this Energy OS system. I love to work through strategy sprint sessions, basically. And that helps to protect the sacred ground. That allows us in the natural ebbs and flows that each of us have, those energy boosters and those drainers, to sit in that place where how do we get more done in the energy boosted times and save some of the repeatable process stuff, the email catch up, whatever the case might be, for the low energy time. And it's also about doing it holistically. It's knowing that we need to recharge. It's not just about pumping energy out, because that's where energy debt starts to come into play. And the impact in that case is, not only did the team alignment and the energy start to ripple out more fully, revenue ended up jumping. So it's not about doing more, but it's about thinking better. Energy intelligence, it's not soft skills, it's hard ROI. And when you can't, literally you can't innovate when you're fried, and you can't scale when you're stuck in survival mode, Josh.
Right. Let's touch on that. So somebody's stuck in survival mode. Somebody's almost fried. They can't get out of bed, or they get shingles, from the stress, right? These are real things that people go through. So tell me, what are the signs of this happening before it happens? What should people be like? Oh, what are they feeling? What are they thinking? What are they going through before they hit that critical where it takes a long time to get back from?
A lot of it gets down into it's a lack of clarity. It's a lack of decision-making clarity. It's a lack of ability to actually move the needle forward to the bigger, more tangible goals. It's also unique to each individual client to a certain extent, right? There are different things. There are different ways that we need to work. One of the rare few things that level sets every human on this planet is the fact that we all only have 24 hours in the day to get done what we need to get done. Even with AI tools out there, we can't fully replicate each of ourselves. We can empower, our brains through those kinds of tools, but I can't ultimately make more of myself. So how do I get done in the 24 hours that I have within the day, the things that really move the needle? That's where I start to come into play. Leaders who they don't have that executive capacity. They're managing their team from an ineffective standpoint. Their team doesn't feel empowered to keep moving towards those bigger goals that they have in front of them. Those are the things that start to come through. It can lead into, even though leadership team dysfunction, it can lead to, poor decision making, because you're coming from that burned out, fried, stressed out level every moment of the day. And that's when you start to pretend that you're on instead of actually producing through high performance energy. And, it's about a lack of sustainable leadership, really. I think people have started to realize that burnout isn't a noble win. It actually can be very expensive. And then when I walk leaders through that starting point of that 30-minute energy audit, they start to see it very quickly, where 70% of their week, let's say, is spent reacting and not leading. And once you rebalance, your decisions get sharper, your team communication gets cleaner, and ultimately the culture lifts across an organization, whether it's 5 people or 500 people.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't joking when I gave those examples, because I know CEOs have gotten to the point of burnout so much so that one couldn't get out of bed. The other one got shingles. Their stress level was so much, their body was revolting against them.
Yep.
So talk to me more about specifically the energy operating system. Walk me through what the framework looks like and what kind of transformation leaders can experience in 90 days.
It's so fun to get into this because it ultimately really gets down into a couple clear areas of really helping these clients out. I look at it actually, Josh, as a three-tiered energy OS system, right? The first phase gets into reset and diagnose. That talks about that 30-minute energy audit that I just mentioned, right? Uncovering those energy drains, what's leading to decision fatigue and leadership friction. And the outcome that comes out of that first phase is that strategic clarity and momentum diagnosis. Then after we reset and diagnose, it moves into the second stage, which is literally rebuilding the Energy OS system. So it's installing rituals, it's building in those capacity rhythms, those nervous system levers, and that execution cadence to lead to intention, energy, and calm authority restored. I think we lose that in that burnout scale, especially that calm authority. Everything feels like shooting in different directions every single moment of the day. Then the third phase is leading forward. You can't ripple out your energy to your team without leading forward. So aligning your team, scaling with presence, and then leading decisively is really the key there to help expand without that burnout or chaos. And, it all comes together, Josh, really, weekly one-on-one strategy sessions. There's a whole Energy OS suite of tools that come into the play. There is that energy tracker that's built for each individual who comes through this. And then there's, that between session strategy support. Also, that asynchronous support is incredibly important in the mix of how I support my clients.
Well, I'd love for you to share a client story, a case study, without sharing names or companies, but please share like with a company you worked with where, tell me where they're at, where they were, what did you do and where are they at now?
Sure. So one client story that always sticks to me, there was an agency owner in San Diego working 70-hour weeks, and they were convinced that stepping away, even for a single day, the whole system would fall apart. Everything would implode. We rebuilt his Energy OS system. We simplified the priorities, delegated some of the noise, and rebuilt the rhythms. And 90 days later, that 70 hours was 45-hour work weeks. Profits were up by over 10%. And his wife and his family told him, "You're fun again." That's honestly my favorite KPI. I'll mention though another. A creative founder told me her brain felt like a browser with 47 tabs open all the time, and 12 of them were stuck and frozen. So we simply even implemented a 10-minute weekly energy audit, and she actually doubled her paying clients in 6 weeks because in both of those cases, that energy clarity created the business clarity, and it works every single time.
I love it. That's fantastic. And those are real measurables. You may not be able to put a number on it, but that's a real measurable when you have other people say, "Wow, you're fun again."
Right. Exactly.
Right.
And I mean, I learned that
it's not something you think is a KPI, but it's very important.
Yeah. And it's something, I've learned the hard way, mostly from, my family, my kids, my dogs. I have to say mornings with kids are like a leadership boot camp. You've got negotiations over breakfast, emotional intelligence drills every moment before school, crisis management over who gets the pink bowl today versus the blue bowl. And honestly, that's part of the practice in real time, right? And, keeping levity as a piece of this. Also, some people might view it as fluff, but it's not. It's actually how you reset your nervous system mid chaos. A few years ago, I read a book that I absolutely love called Humor Seriously, and it actually reframed humor as a trust accelerator in my mind, and it's true. Laughter buys leaders something that authority never can. It's that true human connection. One of the biggest energy boosters, and this especially comes into a leadership perspective, there's joy. Joy is fuel. It literally fuels the tanks of the people around you. Mm-hmm. And you can't white knuckle your way to fulfillment. You have to really design for it.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of family, you have 2 young daughters, and you also have a clear mission to model what's possible for them. So what does success look like for you over the next 12 months?
Success for me, I mean, it's the same thing that I coach my clients on, right? It's that balance of business. It's scaling up the revenue, but it's also maintaining the balance. It's getting out and being a full human at the times that I need to be a human. I know on my own energy roadmap, the things that fill me up, it's family time, it's music, it's concerts, it's going out and having fun. Josh, before we hit record, we were talking about traveling. Traveling fills that cup. You start to do more of that. I mean, I'll equate it down though in terms of energy. How many times do we run into challenges, whether it's in business or in life, and we don't find the solution when we hyper focus on it? The solution actually comes to us when we step away from it for even 30 minutes. You hop into the shower, you go take a walk outside. That's when the answers become clear. That's that executive capacity and that clarity that I so essential, and it comes as part of the work through this Energy OS system.
It's fantastic. So tell me, what's next for Scale Smarter? Are you looking to expand your team, partner with VCs, scale this system into an app or platform?
I think it's actually, part of it is trying to find those right resource partners that can help elevate the business. I'm at a place now, I've built this business as me, myself, and I over the last 4 years. I've done a lot of work to scale it up, to optimize, and to build this into a system. I need to get this system out to more leaders and then see where it goes from there. It could be, it could just be a community of bringing people together. I'm also a big believer, Josh, when we start to identify with other people who might be going through some of the same challenges, the ideas and the energy, the intentionality, when it's in line, gets higher and higher. I'm also at a place, my first book was published last year. That's a book called Make Your Own Glass Half Full, The Empowered Path to Optimism and Autonomy. I have a podcast that went live earlier this year called Is Anything Real in Paid Advertising, that goes back to that corporate career I had where I managed over $100 million in paid ad spend. I'd love to write a second book, going into next year. I won't tease into exactly what that looks like or what that sounds like, but I've got some ideas percolating there of how to influence the world in a positive place. Get more into not necessarily the energy side of it, but other things that play into, how we can stop having our battery blinking red too long, and look at that as a sign to recharge, because your energy, I ultimately see it, Josh, your energy is your brand, and you need to protect it, project it, and watch how everything around you levels up after you start to do that.
I love it. That is an ambitious 12 months that you put together right there, because I know you have some great systems in place to be able to handle all that without getting burned out. So just to wrap up here, I have 2 questions and then a third one afterwards. Sure. Tell me, what is the best piece of business advice you have ever received?
Best piece of business advice. There have been many that I've heard from coaching clients and also other people in my network that I've seen. This is super simple. And a lot of this stuff actually is super simple, Josh, in the way it's actually executed. But trust yourself. Trust your gut. Trust your unique experiences that you've gone through. Trust what's in here. I actually, that's one of the biggest transformations that was told to me. Trust where you're going. Don't trust the outside world around us. I've always been driven, Josh, honestly, by not outside competition in the way that I've architected my own path and my journey. I've always been driven by that internal competition that I have with myself to make things better. I, even 4 years ago when I launched this, probably didn't trust that as fully as I should have. And now I've gotten to a place where I trust what's inside of myself.
That is fantastic advice. So, and then my second last question is, if you were talking to your 15-year-old self, what's the one thing you'd tell him?
Oh my gosh, I might have to answer this in a backwards way than the way you asked it, Josh. My 15-year-old self would absolutely not have any belief that I could get to where I am today with what I've built. I was a shy kid through the end of high school or maybe the first couple years of college. My 15-year-old self would not recognize me at all with what I've done, but it would have told me, even though it wouldn't recognize me, just have fun. Have fun with this. Like, you know, the if you're having fun, everything else comes together in where you go.
That's great advice. So, and with that, please tell people, share with everybody how they can find you. If they have questions, comments, they want to hire you, where should they go?
You know, you can find everything I do from the Energy OS 90-day system to my book, Make Your Own Glass Half Full, at adamwbarney.com. Of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, Adam W. Barney. And of course, you know, I'd love for anyone to check out Is Anything Real in Paid Advertising wherever you listen. It's where truth meets traction in that world of is anything real in paid advertising.
I love it. We will have all of those resources down in the comments below. So just click on down there and then you'll be able to find everything that he just said, so you don't have to go rewind this. So, well, I appreciate you being on today. Fantastic conversation. And thank you so much. We'll probably have you on again. I want to hear more about what's next, what the next step is.
Awesome, Josh. I thank you for having me here today.
All right. Thanks, Adam.